Ecuador's two presidential candidates held a last debate before the April runoff. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov called for strengthening the alliance with Venezuela to neutralize unilateral coercive actions. African ministers of finance, planning and economic development met to discuss the epidemiological situation sparked by COVID-19, among other issues. From the headquarters of TeleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. I'm Gladys Quesada. Ecuador's two presidential candidates held a debate on Sunday's night in Guayaquil as the April runoff nears. The two final candidates for the April 11th runoff, Andrés Araúz and Guillermo Lasso, had their first and only debate this Sunday as focused on economic issues and the effect of COVID-19 pandemic in the country. Organized by the National Electoral Council of Ecuador, the debate lasted an hour and a half. The main topics of the discussion were the use of American dollars as the national currency and its implications, as well as the vaccination against the coronavirus. Guillermo Lasso from the Christian Social Party said that in the first 100 days of his government, he will secure the vaccination of 9 million Ecuadorians. Meanwhile, the candidate for the leftist Union of Hope, the economist Andrés Araúz, who led the first round with more than 30% of the votes, also presented his government strategy.
We are convinced that now it is time to call the union of all Ecuadorian people, men and women, to the many different social organizations, to the productive sector that does not want to be exploited by a financial system that seeks for endless profits. We want to call to the people and different nationalities of Ecuador to put on practice that plurinational and intercultural state.
In the meantime, the right-wing runner for the presidency, Guillermo Lasso, stated he will boost private and foreign investment and will eliminate excessive taxes.
We are going to create confidence. The dollar will be the currency of free circulation in Ecuador. We are going to eliminate the 2% tax on small businesses to stimulate the income of Ecuadorian families. We are also going to eliminate excessive taxes and procedures to promote local and foreign investment to reactivate public projects in the private sector as well.
And also on Sunday, a debate was held in Peru among the 5 presidential candidates who are at the top of the latest opinion polls. The candidates invited to the presidential debate were Johnny Lescano from Popular Action, George Forsyth from Popular Renovation, right-wing Keiko Fujimori from Popular Force Party, progressive Veronica Mendoza from the party Together for Peru, and Daniela from Peru We Can. The debate took place less than a month before the general elections on April 11th on this year. The 5 candidates presented their proposals on issues such as the fight against corruption, the pandemic, security, and other topics of interest. The electoral campaigning is held amidst corruption scandals and instability in Peruvian political landscape, with former President Martín Vizcarra facing bribery accusations and under inquiries for an unauthorized COVID-19 vaccination of his administration officials, relatives, and friends. In Bolivia, after the repetition of the vote in 3 polling stations in the city of Sucre, the Electoral Council of the Department of Chuquisaca declared Enrique Lescano, candidate of the Movement for Socialism Party, as the winner. After counting all the official votes, more than 57,000 declared the MAS candidate as the winner, against the 57,205 votes of the right-wing candidate Horacio Pope from the Republic of Party 2021. With his victory, Enrique Lescano stated that the most of the population has decided to continue with the democratic option in the country. Political parties in Venezuela are preparing for the upcoming regional electoral process. At the same time, institutions continue with the renovation processes or the confirmation of new authorities. We have more details with our correspondent, Leonel Retamal.
From 20 opposition parties in Venezuela, recently signing an agreement to stand united in the upcoming elections for regional governors and mayors that will take place in Venezuela this year, following the path of those who participated in the parliamentary elections of December 2020. They seek to isolate extremist opposition groups that promote violence or a total boycott of the vote.
We do not support insurrectional or unconstitutional methods or foreign invasions or other countries harming our sovereignty in detriment of our people who have only prevented us from successfully taking power, prolonging the suffering of the most vulnerable and dispossessed.
The international community is called to pay attention to these processes and not to those who continue to demand sanctions against the country.
The Venezuelan people are peaceful. We believe in our constitution and we want to solve things through the constitutional path. These actions are by a minority that does not represent us. We are more than 30 million people. The international community does not have to sit down and talk with just 5 parties. We are more than that. We are more than 30 opposition parties. They have to listen to all of us, the population in general. We are in crisis and these sanctions have aggravated the situation.
This is happening alongside the work of several parliamentary commissions, such as that in charge of carrying out the process to renew the National Electoral Council. 75 nominations for rector of the Electoral Council have been accepted, and the process is still open to renew this state power.
For both this committee and this National Assembly, the only objective is that we can live in peace, that we take a step to distance ourselves from those who have made a living from violence, and think the solution is not democratic. For this committee and this assembly, democracy is the only path in an electoral center.
All this is part of a process of dialogue and normalization between the public authorities of the Venezuelan state after the installation of the new National Assembly on January 5th. Commissions investigating the management of the former legislative administration are joining efforts of the Dialogue Committee, which seeks meeting points between the different sectors of society. This analyst explains it the following way.
A big debate is happening right now in Venezuela for the relegitimization not only of the National Electoral Council as the regulatory body, but also the different branches of the state to move forward as a single voice, without denying the different voices within Venezuelan society, but with a need to see ourselves, to recognize ourselves as a single country.
Meetings with business representatives, churches, universities, political parties, and different social and economic sectors in the country have already taken place as part of this process.
We'll take a short break now. Follow us on Twitter at TeleSUR English and Gladys TeleSUR. Welcome back to From the South. During his official visit to China, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov called for strengthening the alliance with Venezuela to neutralize unilateral coercive actions applied by the United States. In a meeting with the Chinese press, Chancellor Lavrov praised the proposal made by Venezuela to create a coalition of 16 countries to confront the unilateral sanctions imposed by the United States and its allies on countries that did not respond to their interest.
Unfortunately, this approach to sanctions has become ingrained in the United States. This instinct was reflected in former presidents Barack Obama and Donald Trump, as well as in the current U.S. administration. Sanctions are obviously useless. The European Union is also following a similar route, imposing sanctions on Russia under hypothetical pretexts.
The head of the Russian diplomacy also called for the breaking the world hegemony of the dollar during his visit to China.
We should also improve our autonomy. Everyone knows the United States claims to restrict the development of science and technology in Russia and China as a target. Therefore, we should promote the establishment of local currencies and other international currencies that can replace US dollar through independent innovation to gradually dismantle the Western-controlled international payment system and reduce the risk of sanctions. The sanctions policies of the West go against the right trend of history, but the course of history cannot be interrupted.
On Monday, China's Foreign Ministry spokesperson Hua Chunying urged the United States to bring the perpetrator in the Atlanta shootings to justice, in accordance with the law as soon as possible.
One of the victims of the mass shooting on March 16 in Atlanta was a Chinese citizen. We are saddened by that. The Chinese side urged the U.S. side to bring the perpetrator to justice in accordance with the law as soon as possible, bring fairness to the victims and their families, and take concrete and effective measures to protect the safety and legitimate rights and interests of Chinese citizens in the United States. The Chinese embassy in the United States is closely following the handling of the case and will provide active assistance to the family of the victims.
And the U.S. government turned down the Russian proposal to hold an online meeting between the U.S. President Joe Biden and the Russian President Vladimir Putin. According to the Russian Foreign Ministry, the United States rejected the proposal of Russian President Vladimir Putin to establish an online conversation with his American counterpart, Joe Biden. With this rejection of a dialogue on the accumulated bilateral problems, as well as on strategic stability, one more opportunity to seek a way out of the impasse in Russian-American relations, the diplomat said. Hundreds of people have been rescued from floods that have isolated thousands of towns in Australia's most populous state, New South Wales, and forced thousands to evacuate their homes as record rains continues to flood the country's east coast. Around 18,000 people have been evacuated in New South Wales by Monday, and emergency services fear up to 54,000 people could be displaced due to rain forecast to continue until Wednesday. Prime Minister Scott Morrison told Parliament that 35 communities in northern New South Wales had been isolated, and emergency services had conducted more than 700 flood rescues. New South Wales Premier Gladys Berejiklian said up to 38 parts of the state had been declared natural disaster areas. We'll take a short break now. Join us again after this. Welcome back to From the South. In Ethiopia, the African Ministers of Finance, Planning and Economic Development met to discuss the epidemiological situation due to the COVID-19 pandemic, among other issues. The meeting opened under the theme Sustainable Industrialization and Diversification of Africa in the Digital Era in the context of COVID-19. The virtual meeting will be attended by designated speakers and ambassadors. The meeting will also discuss debt management, financing innovations, and the orientation of the work of the private sector. As scheduled, the meeting will conclude on Tuesday. Students and youth members of the National League for Democracy returned to the streets of Dawei in Myanmar on Monday, just after sunrise, targeting a time when security forces are usually absent. The small group marched briefly through the southern city, calling for the end of the military junta and restoration of democracy following last month's military takeover. Not long ago, tens of thousands of demonstrators jammed the streets daily, making the demands amid high spirits and a festival atmosphere. But several deadly crackdowns by police and soldiers ensued, leaving a total of 5 people dead. Numbers of protesters have now fallen, and those who still brave the fear of the security forces have changed tactics, breaking into smaller groups and varying the times of their marches to try to minimize the likelihood of a confrontation. The civil disobedience movement has used widespread boycotts, strikes and other actions with the aim to restore civilian government. Hundreds of red balloons floated into the sky in Myanmar's biggest city on Monday as defiant protesters vowed to persist with their revolution to end military rule despite an increasingly violent crackdown by the junta. In the Highland township in Yangon, protesters chanted "The revolution must win" before releasing hundreds of red balloons in support of civilian leader Aung San Suu Kyi, who was ousted and detained. Papers with the words R2P were tied to the balloons as protesters prayed for help for their country. On Sunday, Lebanon registered nearly 3,000 new coronavirus cases and 42 related fatalities. In its daily report, the Ministry of Public Health announced that almost 3,000 new infections were recorded among local residents, noting that the other 25 infections were imported cases registered during the last 24 hours. 42 new fatalities were recorded over the past 24 hours, raising the nationwide death toll to more than 5,000. The country witnessed on Monday the fourth and the last stage of the exit plan approved by the government earlier this month, after 6 weeks of full lockdown aimed at fighting the increase in coronavirus cases and fatalities. The Republic of Congo have gone to the polls to vote in a presidential election that has been boycotted by the main opposition. Access to the internet and social media was cut hours before polls opened at 7 a.m. local time. The incumbent Denis Sassou is widely expected to win against 6 contenders. After first coming to power in 1979, Sassou Nguesso was forced to introduce multi-party elections in 1991 and was defeated at the ballot box a year later. But he returned to power in 1997 following a prolonged civil war. He has won every election since, which the opposition have mostly slammed as fraudulent.
What's different in there are 7 candidates, no less. So I think that all I have to do as a voter is to choose the one I think can do what is needed for the Congo.
Since we have subscribed to democracy, and democracy is decided by the judges, I have come to vote for the candidate of my choice.
Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei has insisted that the U.S. government must lift all sanctions before Tehran returns to its commitments under a 2015 nuclear deal.
They should know that maximum pressure has failed up to now, and after this, if this new U.S. administration wants to continue maximum pressure, they will fail as well, and Iran will stand stronger and more dignified than before. This policy entails that the Americans must lift the sanctions, all the sanctions, and then we will verify. And if they are truly lifted, then we will return to our JCPOA commitments.
On March 22nd, United Nations celebrates World Water Day as a way to raise awareness for the 2.2 billion people living without access to safe water. It is about taking action to tackle the global water crisis. Since 1993, March 22nd activities focuses on the importance of fresh water. A core focus of World Water Day is to support the achievement of Sustainable Development Goal that asks for water and sanitation for all by 2030. This year's theme, World Water Day, is about what water means to people, its true value, and how we can better protect this vital resource. The value of water is about much more than its price. Water has enormous and complex value for our households, culture, health, education, economics, and the integrity of our national environment.
We need to recycle used water to reduce.
And we have come to the end of this news brief. But remember, you can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also, if you feel so inclined, please join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Telegram. For TeleSUR English, I'm Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.